Hello, and welcome to the SharePoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group bi-weekly call. It is September 14th, 2017. Just realized I forgot a space after the comma there in the date, but no big deal. I think we can get past that. We've got a really exciting call, I think, for you guys today with lots of demos. We've got 4 separate demos, so lots of stuff to cover. I think it's going to be really great. But first, for folks that might be new to the call or might be new to watching these recordings, I just want to give you a little bit of an overview of what this is all about. So we live under the larger SharePoint Patterns and Practices program, and a while ago, it's been over a year now, we started this concept of special interest groups because the patterns and practices had grown so big as SharePoint development continues to grow and expand and focusing a lot more, in our case, on client-side development. So we had started this special interest group, and we talk about the SharePoint framework and working with the SharePoint framework and those development patterns, as well as this JavaScript core library that we work on as a community as well, is sort of our topics for this special interest group. We also have ones for sort of the PowerShell and the managed code reusable libraries that I think most folks are familiar with out there. So, of course, check out as many of these calls or as few as you like, but always happy to have folks on the call or watching the recordings. So down there at the bottom, we have 2 links. The first one is the SPPNP-community. That will take you to the Microsoft Tech community. That's a great place to ask general development questions. You're stuck on a project, you're not sure how to proceed, you're working on design. Those are all great topics for there, and that covers not just SharePoint development, though that particular link will take you to the SharePoint I don't know what you call it, area of that tech community, and there's plenty of other areas. So if you have, a focus on Office development, so Office add-ins, something like that, there's communities for that. But that's really the great place, and that's sort of been the replacement for the Yammer groups we had going for a while, or a long while actually. And then the bottom link there is dev.office.com/SharePoint. That's your one-stop shop for all things SharePoint development. And it really covers the new SharePoint framework, so if you're looking to learn that and get into that, there's lots of articles and tutorials and samples and things to dive in with SharePoint framework. But as well, if you're doing development on the add-in model or development in sort of the classic WSP model, the resources are all slowly moving to dev.office.com/SharePoint. So check that out. It's a great place to get the information you need and learn about the new technologies as they're coming out, as well as a lot of the pre-release sort of beta or I don't know what to call it, tech preview, dev preview releases are documented and talked about there as well with samples. So a great place to stay up to date on what's happening in SharePoint development. So what are we going to talk about on today's call? We've got a quick update on the JavaScript core component, as well as we're going to talk about August's numbers, which are really exciting. We've got the SharePoint framework latest news, which will include a short demo from Vesa. We've got demos then from myself. I want to give you guys an update on the PNP JavaScript core library refactoring work. We'll talk about that in a little more detail later. And then from Velen, we've got communication between SPFX web parts through message broadcasting utilizing the pub/sub pattern. And from Chris Kent, we've got item order field customizer SharePoint framework extension. So not for the short titles this week, but I think going to be 2 very interesting demos. I'm excited to see those in action later in the call. And then we might have a little bit of time for open discussion at the end, but I think this is a pretty packed call, so not sure how much time at the end we'll have. But of course, feel free to have the conversations in the IM window as we go through the call. So I just want to remind folks opportunities to participate in both this call as well as the larger Patterns and Practices program. We're always looking for demos on this call, so you saw Velen and Chris will be demoing some stuff later. They got to do those demos by simply reaching out to us on Twitter and signing up. So if you have something cool you'd love to demo, whether it's a SharePoint framework solution, whether it's something using the JavaScript core library or both, or whether it's just general client-side development in SharePoint, kind of a demo. Always excited to have those. Just reach out, let us know. We'd love to have you on the calls. As well, you can contribute on GitHub, and we're always looking for feedback not just on necessarily the library, the JavaScript core library, but sort of the overall program, right? The patterns and practices program. So how are these calls going? How are the videos? We put out a lot of different videos. So how is that stuff going? What would you like to see more of, less of? Always appreciate that feedback from folks, especially when it's framed in a constructive manner. So a quick update on the JavaScript core component. So latest updates. I am a little bit behind on releasing 3.0 of the SPPNP.js library, and that is due to some of the refactoring work and updates I'm going to discuss in the demo and show you guys where we're at. That's actually going very well, but it's taken, I've had to do a little bit more work than I initially thought on some things, but that's we're getting very close there. So we will get a release of 3.0 soon. I'll tell you before Ignite. But I don't have a date yet. And if you're going to Ignite, that's going to be demoed as part of one of the PNP sessions. Vesa can jump in later and remind me exactly which one. But if you're attending, check that out. I'm very sorry to say I won't be there. I'll be back on family leave at that point. But a lot of great PNP stuff, not just around the client-side development, but all the things, PowerShell, etc., is going to be at Ignite, as well as a great chance to meet a lot of the core team members. Sadly, not me, because I always enjoy getting to meet folks, and I think Ignite is a really fun time. So one thing I'm looking at with the SPPNP.js is the possibility of just referencing the latest stuff from this @PNP work we'll talk about, and see if I can just surface that up in the SPPNP.js. But we'll see. Again, not sure how that's going. And did want to add, I've kind of been ignoring the issues list in the repo on purpose because I've been super busy writing code. I will look at those issues before the release. So if there's stuff in there that needs to get fixed, I will take a look through there and respond to things and make fixes. But just a note, as always, if you've got something really pressing, we of course always invite pull requests. So if you're sort of tapping your foot and waiting for me to get to something and you've got a little bit of time, you can, of course, submit a pull request. We absolutely welcome those from folks out there in the community. So a quick update on this @PNP refactoring. We have taken ownership of the PNP organization in GitHub, and so that's github.com/PNP. And what that means is simply a container for us to put our code in. It's in no way a break from what we've been doing or from SharePoint patterns and practices or anything like that. So it's not a dramatic move. What it is a container move. So we'll be moving the code there. Eventually, this is going to replace SPPNP.js. But we'll have all the same functionality, and we're going to talk about that a little bit when I do a quick demo. But this is going to have a documented transition, and we're going to have helper code and samples and things like that. So we understand it'll be a big change, but we're going to do everything we can to smooth that transition, and I really think it will be the right transition for the library and the way we want to grow.
And Patrick, quick comment also from my side on this one. So like Patrick said, we do have now the PNP NPM organization. And really the reason why we wanted to have this one is that in the future, we want to have additional libraries, packages, and all of that grouped under the scope as well. So the SPPNP.js will be the first one, obviously, there. We're looking into having additional packages. There's multiple MVPs who've contacted on, hey, how would we able to work with you guys to get us our packages out using the PNP channels and all of that. So this will be the scope for that. And we didn't want to obviously use at SharePoint or at Microsoft because that's related on the actual Microsoft company. PNP itself, and especially these libraries, these are open source and they are community-driven initiatives. So technically, if Microsoft would step away from PNP, we would hope that the whole thing would still continue. Obviously, we're not looking into doing that, but still, that's really the idea. Anyway, hopefully that clarified the thinking behind that.
Yep. And just in going with that and moving repos and refactoring everything, obviously we're going to need to write new documentation, get samples updated, etc., etc. That's a long list of things. Please understand our time is limited in the way everybody's time is limited in life. So we'll do our best to get that stuff updated as quickly as we can, and we're always looking for help if you've got help updating docs and samples. We're not quite ready for you to help quite this second, but we'll definitely be looking for help with that in the future. And then we also are going to look to release a site around this. So GitHub gives you the GitHub pages, so something on that. So it'd be pnp.github.io, I think would be the address if I'm remembering correctly. So we're going to work on getting a site up there. I've got some ideas, but would definitely look for folks out there in the community that might have some ideas about helping build that site, what would be great, content, things like that, as well as folks. I'll be, again, very honest. I've said this before. I am not a designer. So if there's any folks out there with a great design background or have more experience in sort of CSS and that sort of stuff, would certainly welcome help with that as well. And if I design it, trust me, somebody will want to change it. And then a couple of housekeeping issues, and these aren't directed at anyone specifically. It's just stuff I need to say every couple of months, but just want to say it out loud. So the issues list for the JavaScript core library is not an open help forum. So it's not happening a lot, but it's happening a little bit more. So just want to mention those kind of questions. They're just general development questions. The appropriate place for those, or the better place for those, would be the Microsoft Tech community. Lots of folks there would be very happy to help you with your project designs or your general SharePoint development questions. We do want to keep the issues list kind of focused on the core library. So that can be suggestions for functionality, bugs you find, things like that, but focused around the library. And then, of course, if you have ideas, please submit an issue so we can track it and work it into the development cycle. I've had a few people in different channels, so Twitter, Gitter, various places, say, wouldn't it be cool if the library did X? And sure, we absolutely can talk about it, but I'm probably not going to remember or track that. So if you do have an issue, please, or an idea, please submit an issue, tag it as an idea, and say, hey, I've got this idea for some enhanced functionality. Love to see that, but just please help us track it a little bit because, like I said before, with time, we're all trying to budget our time as best we can for these things. So real quick, I want to talk about some numbers from August because I'm positively thrilled with the growth we're seeing. And so the top chart there is starting from April 2017 to May and ends in August 2017. So you can see we had around 19 million requests go through the library in April. We jumped up to 185 million in May, and then in June we were at 626 million. Dipped a little bit in July, which is standard with vacations and things like that. But in August, we're already back up to 757 million requests through the library, going through 1,457 tenants. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you in the community, because I know it's you guys using this in your projects and your work that drives this growth. And I just have to say it's really, frankly, amazing for me. This is probably the most rewarding development project I've been a part of in my career. So it's great to see the usage and great to see people being able to pick this up and apply it into their work. So let's keep that growth going, and part of that is keep that great feedback coming so we can keep making it better and helping it grow out there in the community. And then the bottom, that'd be a table, not a chart, shows you just the raw numbers from that bar graph. So the count of tenants and the requests. You can see already in September. So I grabbed this a day ago, and that's probably lagging by 2 or 3 days. We're already up to almost 400 million requests, so 390 million roughly requests in September. So really exciting, really phenomenal, and again, that's thank you to all of you out there taking this and using it in your projects. So I just wanted to share those numbers because I'm frankly amazed looking at them for August. So great stuff, and let's keep it going. So now I think Vesa is on on board for a SharePoint framework update.
So a few updates on the SharePoint framework side. So obviously Ignite is coming relatively soon. We will have much more announcements on the Ignite and we can show a lot of other stuff as well. But a few things what have happened during the past week. First, if you are in Ignite, there will be at least four or five SharePoint developer sessions. Check them out. There will be a specific session for PnP where we have also new announcements on our community initiatives, I don't know how we're expanding our thinking and how you can participate in the future as well. We also have a SharePoint PnP booth, which we will be sharing, or it will be a split booth, 2 screens, 1 booth with us, the SharePoint PnP, and then the Fabric guys will be in the same booth. And then there is a separate booth, which is slightly weird. There's a separate booth for SharePoint development and then OneDrive development. Technically, it's slightly weird that we have a SharePoint PnP booth separate than SharePoint development because we are actually SharePoint development, but it doesn't matter. It's a long story how we end up in that situation. Also, if you have actually time and you're flying over to the Ignite on day before, there is a good, pretty nice Office Dev pre-day on 24th of September on Sunday. Jina will be there, I will be there from MVP crew, the PnP MVP crew. We'll have Erwin, Waldek, and Paolo in the room as well, helping on the development questions. There's a quick question on the hoodies. Again, this year, I do know that at least the speakers or the booth people will get the classic hoodie, the SharePoint Dev hoodie. So most likely we'll have some of those to give away in Ignite as well. I'm pretty sure that if you join the pre-day, you will get a hoodie, if that's the deal breaker for somebody. Now, on the actual announcements of things. So last Tuesday, was it Tuesday? So day before yesterday, time flies when you're having fun. So we did announce the Feature Pack 2 was actually released for SharePoint 2016. As part of the Feature Pack 2, the SharePoint framework is now supported in on-premises as well. For the development side, we didn't actually release a new version of the SharePoint framework, human templates or anything like that, and I'll explain that in a second. But we do have a guidance on how to actually start your development on top of SharePoint 2016 in the dev.office.com. And also we do have a video where we walk through what does it actually mean creating a web part on top of the feature pack, and then explaining some of the considerations around that one as I move along within the video. Really cool stuff, because this essentially means that we are aligning or gradually aligning the on-premises development capabilities within the SharePoint Online. So you can actually choose to write a client-side web part which as such work within the both sides. And I'll come back on that one in a second, because there are certain implications on this one. Now, what this means is that, let me try to explain this in a understandable way. So first of all, Feature Pack 2 does support client-side web parts. We do not support extensions in SharePoint 2016 Feature Pack 2. Why? Well, extensions are not yet shipped. And second of all, SharePoint Framework extensions are for the modern experiences. The SharePoint 2016 Feature Pack 2 is still classic experience. So it's all about classic pages. There is no modern lists, modern libraries, modern pages within the SharePoint Framework 2016. The client-side web parts do work on a classic pages, and that's what it means. The SharePoint Framework client-side web parts are now available in the Feature Pack 2. The Feature Pack 2 supports SharePoint Framework 1.0 version, and I'm missing a 1.0 on that one. It's in a smaller bullet point. So the latest version for SharePoint 2016 Feature Pack, which you can use on the SharePoint Framework, is 1.02 right now. And because there's a dependency on the server-side versions as well. And somebody might be, obviously the immediate reaction without really thinking too much is that, wait, I would love to have exactly the same version in SharePoint Online and in on-premises. And to be honest, we would love to be in that position as well. The problem really is that there's always a server-side dependency on the packages, what they're doing, and the APIs, what we're actually hitting. So, and since we cannot actually update your SharePoint 2016 on-premises server, whenever we are pushing an update, we need to do and work on this kind of as multiple versions world. And I'll come back on that one in the following slide as well, slightly explaining what we're going to do in the future. Right now, we released the feature pack 2. We did not release a new version of the packages, which basically makes this development experience slightly awkward. Because right now, if you want to do development on the on-premises, you will actually need to kind of fall back on time to a version 1.02 and then do development on on-premises. And if you want to have the latest and greatest APIs on SharePoint Framework, you can use the 1.2 of SharePoint Framework in SharePoint Online. But that web part doesn't then work in on-prem. So not an optimal situation. We'll work on that one slightly in the future, so we're streamlining that one. Maybe on a SharePoint Framework 2016 feature pack 2 things, maybe one thing to notice, obviously there's multiple things on to consider when you're moving the SharePoint Framework development in on-prem. One of the things to consider is simply the CDN hosting environment, where you're going to host your JavaScript files. Obvious choice, which is absolutely valid choice, is that you're going to dedicate a site or a site collection within your on-premises SharePoint 2016 farm hosting those JavaScript files. Just to be aware that you need to, at that case, you would need to adjust your farm settings, because the .json file is, I don't know why, because it doesn't make any sense, but it is actually a blocked file type for SharePoint 2016. I really don't know why .json would be a blocked file type, but you're basically, you can upload a JS file to a library, but you cannot upload a .json file. I just don't get it. But you are able to adjust that in the server settings, so that's absolutely fine, or in the farm settings. Now, what we're going to do in the future is kind of clarified on this following slide. So, whenever we get the latest version of the Yeoman templates out, which is going to happen relatively soon, obviously within the Ignite timeframe, because in Ignite we're pushing out additional things as well. The updated Yeoman template will ask, are you looking into implementing a SharePoint Framework web part only towards SharePoint Online, or do you want to support also on premises? So there will be a question within the flow, which will then essentially dedicate on the direction where we're heading. And it actually also predicts then the future version, what we're going to use to scaffold your package. And the reason for this one, once again, is the server-side dependencies. So we can't use the latest, greatest SharePoint framework in on-premises because we can't push server-side updates to your server without your permission. And that's really the challenge. So if you answer the only online, we will then use, you will be asked then, do you want to implement a web part or an extension? If you will be answering, hey, I want to do the same stuff, or the web, I want to implement my customization so that it supports both on-premises and online, then the web part is the only option for now. And then that is predicting the actual version which will be applied and used for the solution scaffolding. And that's how we essentially make this happen pretty soon when we push out the latest version of the Yeoman template. Good. I'm just checking quickly the questions. I think I have a quick demo coming up on this one in here. Quickly from Yannick, some 2013 before SP JSON files could be uploaded but not reached to URL. I faced this 2 years ago with not updated farm. Okay. Yeah, I don't know who made the decision and why. And then curious on the SPFX upgrade path for feature pack 2, specifically interim feature pack updates, or do we have to wait for feature pack 3 and so on? To be clear, I'm not asking about the generator, I'm asking about the capabilities supported by the SharePoint framework that will be installed in SharePoint Online. Now, you will always have the latest and greatest capabilities in SharePoint Online. So it's almost always the same story as with anything in SharePoint. The latest and greatest is always in SharePoint Online. For on-premises, we will keep on shipping additional capabilities gradually as part of the CUs or as part of the feature packs. Most likely what will happen from a clarity perspective is that we'll ship only significant updates from a, let's say, for example, for extensions and additional capability perspective as part of the feature packs, which are not as common as cumulative updates, which happen in a monthly basis. I think we already said that there will be an on-premises, again, obviously there will be future on-premises versions of SharePoint, and those are obviously a completely different story. So for the SharePoint 2016, we will keep on updating support for on-premises as part of the larger feature packs. I'm not sure, I'm not aware personally, is there a service pack 2 coming and when, or a feature pack 3 and when it's actually coming, but those are essentially the timelines when we flip the version up. And then for the upcoming SharePoint on-premises version, whenever that's coming out, probably we'll have some public information on that in Ignite. That will have then an additional support and capabilities on top of the SharePoint framework. Hopefully that made sense for Asa's question. Good. Good. Quickly moving forward on things. Cool. There's a thumbs up. That's always good. So I'm going to quickly do a quick demo. Just to this is relatively fast and simple demo to show you what we actually have in the feature pack 2. Just to be 100% super clear on what's actually there. I'm actually checking and showing you how things work. So. Okay, this thumbs up, which probably means that you can see what I'm sharing, which is good. Patrick, confirm. Okay, cool. So this one is this one is a Yeoman template which has been generated using the right version. So if I have a look on quickly my npm view and global and depth equals 0, we can see that in this particular machine, which I'm now running, and then I'm using the wrong commands. That's always helps. Now, I'm always confusing list and view for some reason. I can't understand why. So you can see that I'm running 1.02 as a Yeoman generator in this particular machine. Technically, obviously, I could use a Docker. I could use npm version or npm managers to flip between the npm versions and have multiple generators on the same machine, or the Docker would be probably the best solution for that. But what I've done here is that I've created this relatively simple solution. This is just the plain web part to show you how things can be actually deployed. Few things maybe to notice here. The package JSON is now referencing to 1.000 version. So it's not referencing the 1.2, which would be the latest version of SharePoint Framework. So this will be supported in the on-premises. To be making 100% sure that this package will always have the right versions, you can absolutely run the npm shrink wrap, and that will then make sure that you are always getting that specific version of the packages to the solution, so you don't accidentally get a later version of the solutions depending on the installers what you're using. Now, in my case, I did this. I didn't want to steal too much time on the call, which I already did. But if that is actually the same web part hosted in SharePoint Online. If I open up the same web part or add it in the feature pack 2 environment, I've already deployed that in the app catalog. I will add a page. And because this is on premises, SharePoint 2016 feature pack, let's call this SIG demo. It is a classic page. There is no such thing as modern experience in SharePoint 2016. It's only in SharePoint Online for time being. So I need to go insert, web part, and underneath by default, because I didn't update the category, it's underneath the under development. There's my hello there web part. Adding that one on the page, you can see that it's getting rendered properly in here. Now, there is certain things, and obviously if I now do in the same way as SharePoint Online classic experiences, I can do customization of this setting. So I can open up the configure and I can do something, hello there, SIG audience. And that's it. That's getting updated there, and okay, and we're good to go. So modern web parts in the classic experience. Now, there are certain implications of this one as well. So as you can see, and I want to be fully transparent so that you are aware of this, if we do side by side this web part, that's the SharePoint 2016 feature pack 2. And then we kind of take that SharePoint Online. You can see that the same web part, it is actually the same 1.02 version SPFX web part. It's getting rendered slightly differently from a styling perspective. The functionality is the same, but do the dependencies on the Office UI Fabric and the slightly different styling in SharePoint 2016 and in SharePoint Online, there might be some small changes in the rendering. And you can tackle this actually by overriding these rendering settings within your implementation. I didn't do that. I just took the basic output of my webport, which would be referencing to those styles directly within the page. And that's the reason why you're able to say that there's an alignment or padding difference in here. The same applies if I'm creating a classic page in SharePoint Online, and I can actually quickly prove that because that doesn't take too long. So if I go to Site Pages and quickly create here a classic page, what is it? It's a wiki page then. Highly confusing options. I think, yes, wiki page. If it's confusing for me, it might be confusing for end users as well, but let's not actually concentrate on that one. Now, insert web part under development. It's the hello there web part. If I add that one on the site, we can see that it's in SharePoint Online. It is actually rendered in the padding is there, but that's because of a slightly different styling settings, and the SharePoint Online is evolving faster than the SharePoint 2016. So that's maybe something to be aware within your development. So there might be some adjustments to be done there. But like I said, you can actually fix this by overriding the styles and do the styling properly in the web part as well. Good. I'm not going to do anything more than this. So I'm not going to actually make a wow effect on the web part. My point was more or less pinpoint what's available in the SharePoint 2016 Feature Pack 2. Classic pages, modern web parts, no extensions is the current status. And you can absolutely use the same SharePoint Framework web part in both sites, which is pretty cool. So the same implementation works on both sides. There's small styling differences when that's being done. We'll look into all of this in the future as well. Good. Flipping back on the slides, and I need to actually let other people to move on their demos. So where's the content? And that's today's presentation. Loading on the following slide. I probably had a quick status. So obviously the on-premises support is now being shipped. We're working on multiple things. Based on the feedback 2 weeks ago, I removed all the orange balls from the slide. Obviously we shipped a lot of stuff already. This is the latest stuff which is in the queue, which people know that is in our roadmap. So that's the whole point. We'll have a lot of additional things obviously announced in the Ignite pretty soon. But that's it, Patrick. As the host, let's flip. Actually, it's your demo, is it?
Yep. So let me share my desktop. Oh.
And if there's any questions on the SPFX support feature pack, just use the IM window while Patrick is doing his demo.
And folks, let me know when it shows up.
Got it.
Got it. Okay, great. So just wanted to give everybody an update of what we're doing with the refactor, so it's not a surprise. Try and get some information out there ahead of people. I talked about this a little bit on the last call, but did a lot of hand waving because I hadn't actually done much work on it yet. But now I've done a lot of work on it, so I actually have some stuff to share. So this is actually in the new repo we're looking at here. Some of these files may still get cleaned up, go away. But all of the source code has now moved under this packages folder. So I did model this after what the Angular folks and a lot of other folks out there have done. It seemed like a good way to do it, but all the packages will be in a single repo, which makes it a lot easier to manage, debug, test, all those sorts of things. But looking through these, you can kind of see the package names are a little bit self-explanatory. For example, common, graph. You can kind of guess what these things do, but we've got a lot of the same functionality is now moved to these different packages, with the idea being you could take these packages and use, for example, I broke logging out into its own package, so if you wanted to use our lightweight logging framework in your own application but nothing else we do, you can now do that very easily. So also have written a little build system to help manage all this. We are moving to supporting smaller modules, so less files will be in each NPM package, making them a little bit lighter, so you're not going to get all of the compiled JS. You're going to get the bundles, as well as then all the typings to support your IntelliSense work. But you get smaller bundle sizes, and you can see as it goes through, we're going to process all these. Eventually, there'll be a command line, so you could just build or package a single project as opposed to all of these at once. But right now, it's doing all of these at once. So this is sort of the idea of I'm going to do a release, so I'm going to have a command that will run through all the packages and package them for a release. So I've packaged everything, and then sorry, I should have done this before the call. So you can actually see now there's going to be produced a dist folder that has in it each of the packages. And then each of the packages folders, this is what's actually going to get pushed to NPM. So looking through this, you're going to have a couple different kinds of modules. So you're going to have a UMD module in ES5. You're going to have an ES5 module not wrapped, so just in ES5 or in 2015, ES 2015 module in ES5 target. Sorry, it can get a little wacky. And then you're actually also going to get an ES 2015 compiled target and module structure here. So these are to support some of the tree shaking stuff that's actually, we looked at this, I don't know, whenever we first started this library about a year ago, and the tree shaking stuff was sort of just getting started. It's a little bit more mature now, it's a little bit more broadly supported, so we're going to do our best to try and support that as well. And then, of course, you'll get all your typings files in here to support that sort of stuff. You'll notice all the package JSONs are going to be versioned the same, so all of these packages will be released in lockstep, and they'll be all peer dependencies. So everything will have a peer dependency on everything else at the same level. We're working on how best to install that because I don't want you to have to type npm install for 6 different packages. So we'll be looking at that, but this will hopefully give folks a lot more flexibility in their development. And then finally, I just wanted to sort of show this get used. So these haven't been published yet, but you can actually do the install from a file, which is the same kind of thing. So I've installed the logging package, and I'm also going to install the SP package just as an example. But these will work just directly out of, and you can see I'm getting complaints about some peer dependencies. So let's go ahead and we'll install those. So we've got those installed, and let's open up an editor. And so then we'll actually be able to bring in stuff. So like this, and Logger does all the things you'd expect with the IntelliSense and the comments, but you'll also be able to do something that I think is a little more exciting than just logging, which is bring in just the SP functionality that you're familiar with. So if you're using just SharePoint functionality, you'll be able to bring that in and use it without a lot of the other baggage, for example, Graph and Node support. So we've broken all the Node-related classes. I'm going to break out a lot of the add-in related stuff to a separate package. So again, the goal is to kind of shrink these packages as much as we can. We'll see how far we can take that, but to give you a little bit of an idea, if we look at the minified SP package size, so if you take one of these, we're actually still really big right now because we have some additional stuff that's coming out. So haven't made a ton of progress, but we will get there on minifying this stuff. So the idea here is you'll be able to bring in these packages as you need, and then use them, and we're sort of trying to take a more it's been a year since we kind of came up with everything, and then we will have to then go through these other pieces and get it all out there for everybody. So happy to take questions, and like I said, this isn't out yet. This will be out by Ignite as a beta, so check that out, and I'll make an announcement when it's out. But I want to stop and give plenty of time now for whoever was next. So if I can get back to the manage content. Share this. I think Velen was first.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes. So if you want to go ahead and take over and give us communication between SPF web parts through message broadcasting utilizing the pub/sub pattern.
Okay. Let me see. Share my screen. Just let me know when you see my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
I've got it. Yep.
Okay. That's nice. Hello everyone, my name is Velen Georgiev and I'm a SharePoint developer since the early days of SharePoint. Excuse me if I speak too fast, but I have to give some time to Chris as well. So today we're going to have a quick look at communication between the web parts through message broadcasting or utilizing the pub/sub pattern. I won't go to theory what that is. In the README file, I've specified a URL, very good URL, where within the Wikipedia, and you can have a look what publish subscribe pattern is. But I'll directly go into the demo and show you how this looks. I also try to cover two samples at once. One is using the event aggregator API that's out of the box with the SharePoint framework, but still in alpha, so don't use it in production. And another implementation done by me as a temporary solution to be used while this goes live. Okay, now let's see the first demo. There's my first sample here. It's called React Events Aggregator. And I already started the Node.js server. Within the solution, we have two web parts. The first web part is called Broadcaster. The second web part is called Receiver. And if I broadcast a message here, we'll receive the message here. Simple. But as you can see, these are two different web parts, and they communicate each other. Now, if we go into the code, there is my code, and there is a solution, and these are the two web parts that I have within the solution. If we go to the broadcaster, it's a fairly simple one. We have one button that triggers a method down below, and there is the method here. The fun part is here where we trigger the event aggregator API, and we code event aggregator rise event. That's the event name. That's a follow-up action. This is how Microsoft recommends to specify the event follow-up by an action here. And then there is my data. So my data is just one single number that increases with every hit of the button. Nothing really interesting. Then we have a source ID and target ID. For now, these are all strings with not enough documentation from Microsoft, but this is still in alpha, so we expect a bit more. For now, as a string, you can place the name of your web part or some kind of a unique identifier here, because it will be useful when we catch that event within the next web part. So as you can see, this comes from the properties. I'm in a component, React component, and this comes from the properties, but where we actually create an instance of that event aggregator. Since it comes from the properties, that would be a one level up within the web part itself. And as you can see, there is my property and there is the event aggregator. It's located under this. This means that the web part itself, the context of the web part, and then we have event aggregator. If I hover on that, you can still see that it's alpha, and everywhere it says alpha. So again, don't use it in production for now until it's ready. But you can go to the definition and then still see what's there, and go through the documentation as well, so you're aware of what's there. There is my rise event here, event name and data. On the receiver web part, what we have there, just collapse those. On the receiver web part, again, a very simple web part with just one array that shows that I've received the information here. And then in the constructor of the React component, we again have the event aggregator, but then we have subscribe by event name. That is my event name, and here we have a handler method. This is how we can subscribe for events, and once that event is broadcasted, we can change another component or another web part behavior based on that, and there's my handler down below. Nothing interesting, I'm just appending another value within an array, and I'm changing the state of the React component so we can display that change. Okay. Something else interesting here might be the unit tests. So I've added plenty of unit tests for you, so you can have a look how you test a broadcaster or a publisher, and how you can test the component that has subscribed to a message or to an event. And I'd like to thank for that sample for my colleagues, because actually Miguel Rebasa from Spanish Point found that we have functionality out of the box there, and myself and Austin Breslin from Primerica just refactored the solution a bit so it's more testable. And while Miguel was working on that, I was absolutely convinced that we still don't have such a functionality within the SharePoint framework, and I decided to go with my own implementation of that API, and that's the next sample. So I'll just quickly stop that one. And even close it. And that sample is, again, part of the PnP samples. It's there as a temporary solution that you can use until the other one goes live. And if I run it here, we'll see the very same behavior. Again, we have a broadcaster and a receiver, web parts. Within the broadcaster, we have, again, just a button that triggers the very same event. Okay, it loads. I want to quickly show you how it looks. It's not that different, but okay, almost there. But here, as you can see, instead of event aggregator within that method, I have something that's called event emitter. And instead of rise event, I have another method that's called emit. And then we have the event name and the data, pretty much the same. The only difference is that we own the API, and the API is over here. I'll go briefly through the API in a minute once we have the new sample. Let me see. Broadcaster, receiver. The only difference is the title to show the difference, but as you can see, it transmits the messages. And if we have another receiver, both web parts receive the messages again. The same applies for the first sample. And also, if we have another broadcaster, the second broadcaster broadcasts messages to the receivers as well. We work in a absolutely the same way, but just a different implementation. If we go to the receiver, again in the constructor, we have that event emitter on replaces subscribe by name from the previous sample, but again, we listen for that event name and we trigger that method down below that changes the state. Now, The main difference here is that the implementation, we own the implementation and the API is here as a separate library. And if you go here, you will see that I'm using ReactiveX. ReactiveX is a kind of popular library heavily used within Angular 2 and on. It utilizes the observer pattern, but because we have that subject object there, we can easily create our own event bus and behave like the same way like the event aggregator. It's single tone, so all the web parts communicate through a single tone here, and emit is just emits or broadcasts events using some functionality from the ReactiveX library. On again, this is like a subscribe for event. There's the event name and the handler, and off is like unsubscribe. That's pretty much from my side. A typical case is in SharePoint we have is the search page. If I just go and edit, you will see multiple web parts here, and they communicate through events and message broadcasting the same way like we saw from the sample. As you can see, the search box is one web part, the search navigation another, search results a third, and then we have refinements on the left. If I just stop editing and just hit that web part, it will communicate with the rest in a similar fashion. If I just type in here, as you can see, these web parts on the left changed and the results changed as well. It just triggers events in a very, very similar fashion that I've just showed from the SharePoint samples. And that's pretty much from my side. Patrick.
Great, thank you. That was really fantastic. And if shoot me a link where if you've got that code publicly, I can make sure to include it in the post about this call.
Yeah, that's already part of the SharePoint framework samples. I will send you links.
Okay, great. That'd be perfect. Thank you. Great demo. Really cool stuff. Chris,
thanks.
I think you are up. If you are... Oh, Vasa's got the link right there. Perfect.
Yep. All right. Okay, everybody. Hello, my name is Chris Kent. I'm the SharePoint practice lead for DMI. I clearly really like these SharePoint framework extensions. So let's take a look at another one.
I've got your screen on my screen.
All right, good. Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk about a field customizer this time. So the basic idea of a field customizer is you're going to customize the display of a field in a list view. So you can take things like that kind of ugly % field right there and wow, it's so pretty now, right? You can convert that, do all sorts of kind of custom display, but you can also go a little further with that, which is what I'm going to show you today. All right, so just to kind of set the scene, I'm going to talk about out-of-the-box list item ordering. So there is an internal order field on your list, and it's used natively by Orderable List. So if you have an orderable list, like a links list, for example, you're going to see in the view, right above sort, you're going to get this allow users to order items in this view. And, on the classic UI, you're going to get a reorder page, which you can launch by clicking that change item order button up in the ribbon, right? And you get this kind of kludgy, but hey, it works, change item order dialog, right? And that's fine, but again, that's classic UI only. And up until recently, things like the links list, the announcements list weren't even a part of the modern list view, but they are now. So you're kind of missing some of that functionality. The other side of that is if you don't have an orderable list, because the order field is hidden, right, even though it's on all your lists, you really can't take advantage of the UI. And so regardless of whatever value you think this user interface has, it's not even available to you outside of these types of lists. So that's where this sample comes in. So this is the item order field customizer. And what it's going to do is going to enable the reordering of list items through drag and drop directly in the modern list view. So this sample illustrates several things, like loading PnP JS Core, jQuery, jQuery UI from CDNs, which you should always do. Don't bundle those up in your package. It's going to take advantage of that order field, right? We're going to use the JS Core magic batching to get all that stuff going. We're also going to apply some CSS animations in SCSS, which isn't totally straightforward, so you can take a look at that. We're not going to look at that today, but it's all in there. The sample link is down there. And then finally, because we are doing a little more than just showing a custom field, we're actually going to be editing some list items. We do check the permission level and disable ourselves if we don't have it. All right. So finally, if you want this to work on your list, you have to have your list be orderable, right? So if your list is already orderable, right? So, hey, you're good to go. No problem. So if it's a links list or something like that, no problem. The other thing is, right, so if you just have a custom list or some other list, you can take advantage of that order field. Right, so you can go old school if you need to. Open up SharePoint Designer, edit your views camel, and change the the order by element there to use that internal order field. Or I've included a PowerShell script which uses the PNP PowerShell commandlets, and you can just pass it a view, and it'll recreate it. It basically does exactly what you do in SharePoint Designer, but you don't have to get your hands dirty with that thing. Okay, and then kind of the last thing you can do is you can provide your own custom ordering field, and this is done through the client-side component properties. And we'll take a look at that. It's really simple, but basically if you provide a number field, we'll use that instead. All right, and finally, because this is a little bit different, we've got, for the demo, what I'm calling a placeholder field. So you can use this with any field, but we're going to take over the display with an icon that kind of indicates status. So what I have here is a calculated column, which is just set to an empty string. The nice thing about that is it doesn't show up on the new and edit forms. It makes that pretty easy. So let's see this thing in action. Okay, so here is a classic links list. So this is an orderable list. So I could say, like Paul's blog really belongs on top. I can just drag that, bring it on up, and you'll see all of those update. And I can say, no, actually I belong on top. Whatever you need, right? So the idea here is you can quickly just drag and drop and sort those. And if we take a look over here, here's an example where we've taken a classic view, right? So this is not a classic view, a modern view, but this is a classic list that's not a links list, but we've applied that view. And so again, we get the exact same thing, right? So we can move our Muppets around however we need to. Okay, and the last thing here is we'll show you that I've got a custom order field on my records list, right? I don't want to use the order one for whatever reason. Maybe it's an old list I've had for a long time. People have been using that for a long time. You can just specify that. And I'll show you up here in the debug string at the very end here where I'm specifying those client-side component properties. You can see I've just specified order field, and I've given it the internal name of custom order. Pretty complicated. But then I could say that, bodyguard really belongs at the bottom of the list, right? And all that just kind of works. So let's take a look very quickly at the code for that. Okay, so here's how the code flow kind of works, right? So again, we load all three of those from CDNs. Very straightforward. You'll need the types for both the jQuery and the jQuery UI. Meanwhile, you'll install the SPPNP.js package as a dev dependency. All right, and in the code, for any field customizer, you really get three kind of methods you override. So the onInit, onRenderCell, and onDisposeCell. They're pretty explanatory what they do there, right? So onInit, so what we're doing here is we're going to set the field to use based on the properties. That's just a single line. We're just going to check those component side properties and see what we want to use there. And then finally, every time you use PNP.js Core inside SharePoint Framework Solution, you're going to want to do a special init that just sets that SPFX context. It's really easy. It's just cut and paste. So take a look at that, grab that. So on render cell, we're doing a couple of things there. So we're going to set that icon, right, based on whether you have edit list item permissions or not. If you don't, we actually kind of gray out the icon and we don't enable that reordering. Otherwise, we're going to store the ID and the order value kind of for later reference so we know the current order and how those map to list items. And then we're going to kind of do this backwoods thing here. We got processing a rolling timeout. And the reason I'm doing that is for my own event, which is on cells rendered. Just real quick, that on dispose cells where you would do things like if you're using React, you would unmount your components, right? You would stop your event listeners, whatever you do there. We're not really using that in this code here. But in the on cells rendered, which is, again, my way of getting an event when all the cells have rendered, that's where I'm actually applying what's called the sortable out of the jQuery UI, which enables that fancy drag and drop stuff. I didn't really have to do much for that. And then we save the initial row order. And at that point, we're good to go. People can start doing their reordering. And so the way we handle that is we got an on order change, and all we do is we see, are there actual changes? If there are, we call save changes. And then save changes. All we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we show that animated loading icon. So we're just going to swap out that icon a little bit and apply a couple of classes. Pretty straightforward. Then we're going to do some magic where we're going to swap around the order values. You can take a look at the logic of that. It's actually not as complicated as maybe even that sounds. But the really cool thing is because we know we're always going to be updating at least 2 items. But right, if you grab an item at the very bottom of the list, drag it all the way to the top, you could be potentially updating all of the items. So what we're taking advantage of is that PNP JS Core batching. It's super powerful. It's really easy. You just create a batch and then just go for it. We'll just ignore my meeting there. All right, and that's it. So we'll take a look very, very quickly at the code. You can see here up and on init, this is all the work we have to do to get our property, right? And we either set it to that or we set it to our internal order field. This is that PNP initialization I told you about. Very straightforward. Down here in our render cell, this is that rolling timeout right here where we're kind of canceling a timeout, we're starting a timeout again. Better or worse, right? It's working. So we kind of track things. We're going to set those icons. This is pretty straightforward. Take a look at the code. Take a look at the sample. The real magic happens down here, right? This is where we set that sortable. It's a single call, and we just provide an event we want to handle when things move around, which we do down here. And this is just a quick comparison to see, did we actually change anything of value? And then to save it, this is the real power of JS Core comes in. We don't care how many dirty rows there are, right? There could be 2, there could be 30. It does not matter to us because all we're going to do is we're going to create this batch right here where we've got this item batch. Very straightforward, just called create batch. And then we go pnp.sp.web.list, and we're going to go down here. And before we update this guy, we just call in batch. And that's all you need to do to get all of that kind of batched up. You execute it, and there you go. And we turn off that loading, and we reset the order, and we're all good to go. So that's all that's involved. And again, the magic is all in the JS Core. Okay. All right, I think I was able to do it just in time, so if you have any questions, just come see me or whatever you need, okay?
Great stuff. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Velen, for 2 fantastic demos today. Thanks to all of you for coming by. I'm going to jump briefly back to the slides so we have the next meeting date in the recording. Great demos, great stuff today. Really great to see the community get involved. And as always, if you guys, other folks out there would like to do a demo, please just get in touch. Very happy to facilitate that. Our next meeting will be September 28th. Look forward to seeing all of you then on the call. Thanks very much. Have a good day.